Perry, how are we doing for time? We're doing fine. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to pose the first question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. Our first topic was progress in the hemp industry, and our second one was finance. So this one is going to focus on finance. So what are the trends that investors are investing in right now, and how can the Alberta Hemp Alliance and the Alberta government provide some assistance to help companies to become more investable? David, do you want to start?
Why not? So de-risking things is really tough in an agricultural setting, right? So I have industrial customers. They're used to getting things made of glass fiber reinforced plastics or plywood or materials that are or petroleum-based products that are well established, well known. There's no risk in the material. The materials have been de-risked, and we're asking people we're attracting capital based on farmers who know darn well that farming is a risky business, right? And we're asking for agricultural feedstock for industry. So we have to de-risk that in terms of the ability to process it at scale, build it at scale, with consistent quality control that pass PPAP tests in the automotive, ASTM tests, and everything that we're doing. So that is actually a challenge to the capital markets. I'm going to address it from the capital market side. The second thing is we're in a capital-intensive business. All these companies we're talking about, this is high CapEx. This is not an app. This isn't SaaS. This isn't something you throw in and you expect, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, you go public, you're good, right? Or you sell. So, but here's the good news about that. Big funds now, I'm talking $1 trillion, multi-billion-dollar individual funds are organizing and have announced right now carbon sequestration goals. And carbon sequestration is high CapEx, you guys. If you're going to put something in the ground, carbon in the ground, if you're going to extract it from a top of a tower, from a smokestack, if you're going to change the way we change automotive industry, et cetera, to electric, these are big CapEx projects. And so we have to start to speak the language of the capital markets and start to attract them to what we're doing here. And here's the good news. Because of the feedstock here in Canada, we can be the low-cost producer. We're not charging a premium for our products. We literally have to pose this as being the low-cost producer. And at the same time, we have to remove farm risks. So we, as a buyer of your material, have to pay in advance, share the risk with you, so that what happened a couple years ago doesn't happen all over again, and then we just destroy we shoot ourselves in the foot, right? So those are the few ideas I think I would give you.
Yeah, good comments for sure. And again, just for background, so I spent better part of 20 years in oil and gas finance. So spent a lot of years talking to Canadian institutional investors, U.S. institutional investors, global investors. And what you have to understand is that there's very different mindsets in the different geographies. And unfortunately, Canada has the most conservative institutional investment crowd out there, bar none. It's not meaning to be harsh, but that is the reality. You've got institutions that don't like to take abnormal risk. If they can hug an index, they'll hug an index. They won't step out and do anything too differently. Is generally the crowd that will provide funding when you don't really need it, right? When you're already producing lots of cash flow and have a big return on capital. That's where a lot of Canadian institutions fall, from my perspective anyways. So unfortunately, that creates an environment where I think for this next stage of scale-up for Inca, Blue Sky, and a lot of other companies in this room, unfortunately that means that we have to be open to looking elsewhere for capital, right? That you're probably looking at US for that risk and scale-up capital, not Canadian investors. And that's hard for small Canadian companies to find access to that market. So that's maybe where there's a role for government in some way, and organizations I think like Invest Alberta to help bridge those gaps and connect those small Alberta companies with U.S. investors that have the risk appetite to fund these types of projects. The one thing that could change that, though, is the whole ESG mandate. And again, it's amazing how that has evolved and how powerful an investment theme that's become. So, but I think what has to happen in the hemp space to really get ESG investors fully on board is really seeing that this carbon sequestration story that we're talking about and that we all absolutely believe, but I think that they need to see the proof, right? They need to see the studies, the formal research to really show them that that is an investable topic. So the ESG thing is the one angle that gives me hope that we can maybe get Canadian institutions involved in some earlier stage funding, but we need that carbon story really locked down and told. And unfortunately, and I think we've talked about this at the AHA board level, we just don't really have that credible information. So there's hope. I think it's ESG or it's going international.
I agree with all the comments so far. I'd just like to back up a stage and say, how did we all get started? And usually it's family and friends chip in a few bucks. Unfortunately, Brenda and I don't have any friends, so we just chipped in our own bucks. But so you kind of look around, we get started that way, and then I go, okay, well, can I borrow some money? And everybody goes, well, not really. Where's your cash flow? How are you going to pay for that? And then I go talk to somebody, well, maybe you should take your company public. And the advice is, do it now before you get started. Have a good story, get out there and do it. Or you have to wait till you got cash flow and you have EBITDA and you can sell your company for 5, 7, 8 times EBITDA. And so that's as simple as it is for me. I mean, I haven't gone out there and pounded the U.S. investor bushes, and I don't have time for that. I mean, those of us that have been up here talking, that this morning at 5 o'clock I was out in, working on the decorticator and still bleeding a bit. And so we don't, how do I take, a few months out of my schedule to do that? So I think it's pretty tough goal, and so if you're going big scale, which I really hope this happens, and you can invest in that in time and energy, then good. But when you're started family and friends, and the next stage you have to go get investment, where do you go? Well, the first place you go, and I've been there as a Canadian investor, and they go, well, I can get 27% in the oil patch without blinking an eye, and I get that cash flow next year. What's your value proposition? Well, give me a couple $1 million, and then I'll order some equipment from Europe, and it'll be here and installed in a year and a half, and then I think I got markets for it, but my cash flow is negative right now. They go, well, sorry, next. And so that's kind of where it's at. And that's where, but investors, I'll just reiterate one last point. Investors listen to governments, and Alberta has been so good at this, and it doesn't a lot of times take very much, but if investors know the government's on board and they're supportive of an emerging industry, then they're more likely to come. And my last comment, which is going to be controversial because I do it once in a while, is ESG, when they stopped taking Canadian oil because they were buying Russian oil because of ESG, that's a wild game, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so my experience with investors and public money is questionable, to say. So I will speak from a very niche perspective of a business that is financed by conventional everyday banks and credit unions. And this is where, I'm not going to say nothing that you have not heard a zillion times before. Cash is king. They want to see the cash flow. So, okay, how do you get to cash flow or more cash flow after FNF, friends and family, fools and family? Some say, kind of delete your Facebook account, from their friends and something. So putting the Ukrainian war out of the equation, because that may mess things up totally. Nobody knows how that will end. I'm not a prophet here, but with the previous problem being the COVID and current still, what we face in our actual business with actual clients that are paying actual dollars for the invoices that they have to pay for, it's the supply chain control. We have California ports clogged up. We have Shanghai, city of the size of 3 New York cities, literally locked down, like in a way that none of us could imagine, being not from that area, right? And your Walmart, your Whole Foods, your Toyotas of the world, they can see that usually even faster and better than some of us do, right? So they want to ask that question: how secure is that business that I'm about maybe to give you, right? And if you get that business, you may go to your BMO and Van City or whoever is financing you anywhere in the world, and you have that binding letter of intent, or have that. If you have that purchase order, you can go factoring that, and this is the old school way how to finance your business. So that is supply chain diversification and control. In our subjective personal experience, those fixed contracts with our long-term farming partners saved us enough to grow. Now we are in a situation where they ask us for more. They say, okay, that's okay, your Eastern European business is fine. Now what about, and these are actual conversations with, Walmarts and stuff of the world. They're like, okay, that's too far. It used to be okay 2 years ago. Now the world is different. Show me how you're going to take care of that business of ours, that multi-million business, for example. If you can build, a bulletproof case of how you will make sure some problem in China, Russia, Ukraine, or something will not affect whatever you are about to, or you are already manufacturing, you are probably good. Because at least in food space where I come from, some aisles at shopping malls are still empty, meaning there is space to take some money from these retailers of the world. So I would say, make your supply chain bulletproof. That is my one advice. Thank you.
We'll take a couple of questions. Yes?
Okay. I was remiss the last time I didn't introduce myself. Janet J. Bush, I'm the mayor of the town of Marythorpe, booming metropolis of the town of Marythorpe, Alberta, Canada. Don't laugh, we have 2 Mortons.
Woohoo!
I like you better already. So I just got a couple of things. First of all, Skramatas, Herojem Slava. And you're right, the old standards aren't enough anymore. I was happy to hear the mention of ESG. I was at the Economic Developers Conference a little bit ago, and ESG is a big topic. Environmental social governance. Trade partners aren't happy just to say, yeah, we're doing it right. They want to know you're doing it right, and Alberta and Canada are leaders on the ESG landscape. So that's a good thing for us. We need to sell that more. We need to blow that horn. For Dan, first of all, Lori Jo mentioned you go from dusty to dressed up, and she mentioned a dress and a suit. I'm just curious as to who wears which. But beyond that, you mentioned this emerging industry needs a win. What could that be? What's that possible win in a short window?
I think it's when one of us or one of the other presenters comes out and sells their business at a high premium. So I think that's going to be the win, and or investors see the value to want to invest more. And so we've seen one example of that. We got, I don't know, hope they don't mind me talking because they're here, but we got an example here of one win in Alberta where a group bought Hemp. And so that's the transaction that took place. That was a group of investors, a couple of them famous, that came and invested in our industry. And so I think that's a win. And we also had the same thing with Hemp Sense in Manitoba in the last couple months. And so the win is when we have financial results that are positive and we have as good or better return than other companies in other fields. Because when we have that, then we have an industry that's investable. So I would, we're going to hear from panel the next panel, and my question to them is, what does an investable industry look like? And so I don't think we're there yet. And so that's why we need to reduce the risk for investors.
Brought up during your presentation that at one time Canadian growers here at Hemp had a head start on the rest of North America, and that Alberta sort of de-risked through Alberta Initech, de-risked the growing of hemp, the manufacturing of hemp and stuff. And you feel now that the rest of the world is catching up, and I sort of thought I caught from you that we've been helping them, having access to all that technology, all that data that Canadians and Albertans have paid for. Is that where you were going with that?
I do believe that. I maybe didn't say it directly, but I do believe that, but I think it's the other way around. I mean, we can go to Europe and we can learn from their technology, which we've done. A lot of people in this room have been there. And we can go to our friends in the States. You've got in Montana a 4-ton-an-hour decorticator starting up this month. And so they phone and we share information readily. We're Canadian, but in this industry, there has been no competition. So if you've got strict competition, usually you protect your secrets pretty hard, but we don't do that much. I'm sure all of us have the odd trade secret, but we're pretty open with stuff. So if you want to go in the hemp seed business, you can probably do that. And if you want to go in decortication, you can probably phone me up and I'll tell you what I know, and then you can phone somebody else up and learn from them. And it's not, the other thing I'd say is this industry is, to get started isn't that hard if you've got some money. It's a pretty simple business when you're starting, but then when you want to get an oil that has a temperature that you can cook with, it gets complicated, right? Or if you want to build a panel for an airplane, it gets complicated. Or a bulletproof vest that's half the weight of a regular one. Those kind of things are the potential, but it gets complicated. So my point that I was trying to make is that I don't think in expertise and some of the examples here, we've got someone from Europe here, and we've got people from the States here, and the point is that there's no secrets there. If you want to put in a food manufacturing plant, a lot of cases you're willing to look around the world. And so why do you come to Alberta? Because we've been the leader in the development of the industry, and we've been in the leader of developing to the point of an emerging industry. But it's just, so the next hurdle, all I can say is that every second headline I read is that the U.S. government just put in $100 million for this. There's another $50 million for that study. I get a call from someone in Montana that's building a huge decorticator for several $1 million. I said, well, how much money you got into it? None, because it's all paid for by the government. And I built factories. I built wood processing factories in the States, and it's not the same. The incentives are, it's all, they say it's a free enterprise down there, but there's lots of incentives to do things. So I just say that, I think we still have the advantage in Alberta by the talks we've had today, but we could lose that real quick.
Can I have?
Yeah.
I'd like to give a different perspective of that. The advantage up here is low-cost production of wide-scale hemp. That's the advantage. I'm a business guy, not a farmer. My press lines for these panel products come from Germany because they manufacture the best press lines in the world at IPCO. My decortication lines come from Tamafa, a French company. Best mechanical decortication in the world. We've modified them to get a much more refined fiber. My pulp lines to make biobalsa come from Onsritz, very large-scale international pulp and paper company. My customers are global. So what the hell am I doing in Canada? Raw material supply and the ability to do it right here. And I will tell you that there are big bucks in the U.S., but we're building a parallel factory for composites in Bristol, Indiana, and the government support there has been some tax incentives. I'll be dead before I need tax incentives. I mean, you know, it's 5 years from now, right? That's forever for me. I'm quick twitch. So the advantages here have been local support, MLA support, ministry support, not huge, but it's de-risk and it's affirmation, so that when the capital community looks at that and says, wow, you've got all these government agencies, you got the mayor of Vegreville helping you out in terms of locating the right kind of land, that may not seem like a lot to people who are used to these giant dollar numbers, but to markets and investors, it's affirmation, it's proof, it's de-risk. So I'm glad we're here. I think, listen, you guys, honestly, it just takes some will and some guts. And the guts is the pull through. If you know, that's it.
Good. Wonderful. Okay, those were your 2 questions. But all those bankers, those 4 or 5 people in the room, look out. There's going to be a lot of people coming over to have chats with you. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. And you're all here for today and tomorrow, right? Yeah. So please come up and introduce yourself and have a good conversation.
Thanks.